All right, I want you to picture this. The sky above you has turned this eerie, bruised green. Thunder is rolling in fast, and you're just a 12-year-old boy named Owen, rushing around trying to gather firewood before the storm absolutely downpours. But then you hear something that definitely isn't thunder. It's a sound way lower than that. It honestly sounds like something impossibly heavy trying to breathe through solid stone. Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to unpack an absolutely brilliant piece of modern fantasy storytelling, the tale of Owen and Vaughn.
So I really want you to ask yourself a serious question here. What would you do if you found an ancient, dying legend basically hiding in your backyard? Because when young Owen actually followed that terrifying grinding sound into a mountain cave, a cave he'd been strictly warned to avoid his entire life, mind you, he didn't find a bear. He didn't find a mountain lion. He found a massive, dark gray dragon with iron-colored scales and deeply wounded shoulders, just lying there, waiting for its final breath.
Now let's dive right into this, because the dragon's opening words set the entire emotional core of our story. The dragon, whose name is Vaughn, doesn't roar at the boy, he doesn't attack, he just looks at him and says, "I am dying," stating it like it's just an inescapable fact, like the weather outside. Vaughn isn't angry at all. He is utterly defeated by time and loss. His desire to just give up in that cave really mirrors a very human experience of profound grief. In fact, Owen recognizes this hollow surrender almost instantly. He'd seen his own father, Gareth, mourn his wife by sitting at a kitchen table for 4 straight days, just entirely lost to the world.
To really understand how this beautiful relationship between a boy and a monster unfolds, we're going to structure this explainer just like the chapters of an old fantasy book. We'll start with discovery in the cave, move to a stubborn act of care, see how a village changes its mind, face the dragon hunters, unlock the ground covenant, and finally reach flight and farewell.
So, let's jump straight into Chapter 1, Discovery in the Cave. Stepping out of that torrential rain, Owen enters a dry, warm cavern, and it's right here that the sheer, overwhelming scale of what he's found really takes hold. Think about the contrast. On one side, you have Owen, just a small, fragile 12-year-old kid. On the other, Vaughn, a 400-year-old terrifyingly immense creature, with iron-thick scales, a badly angled wing, and wounds so incredibly old they look like part of his very shape. A normal person would absolutely run, but Owen's radical empathy pushes him to just sit down near the cave entrance and pull his knees to his chest. He's terrified, sure. His hands are literally shaking, but he simply refuses to let this hurting creature die alone in the dark.
Which brings us nicely into Chapter 2, A Stubborn Act of Care.
Because despite the dragon explicitly telling him not to come back, Owen makes a persistent, completely uninvited return. Trust between them doesn't just magically happen overnight. 3 days after the storm, Owen goes back, dropping off some wrapped dried meat and a clay water jar. He doesn't try to force any interaction, he literally just sits there and counts cracks in the ceiling. But later, he finds the food is gone, and that narrow-necked water jar is tipped on its side because, well, the dragon's jaw was way too wide to drink from it normally. Owen quietly takes note to bring a wider jar next time. Fast forward 3 weeks, and this silent companionship really starts to pay off. Vaughn finally starts talking, sharing these incredible stories of the old world. By the 8-month mark, this stubborn, everyday act of care actually coaxes Vaughn out of his isolation, prompting him to step outside into the night air for the very first time in nearly a year.
But let's be real. Secrets do not last forever in small villages. Soon enough, Owen's fiercely protective father, Gareth, discovers exactly what his son is doing and follows him right up the mountain. Now, Gareth has hunted bears. He's hunted dangerous game. But standing before a creature that has been alive for 400 years, that's a completely different ballgame. Yet, Gareth doesn't even flinch. He steps right into the cave, looks this ancient monster dead in its golden eyes, and firmly threatens to make it regret ever hurting his son.
Now, you'd probably expect a massive dragon to just strike back at a threat like that, right? But instead, Vaughn slowly replies, "That is the most human thing anyone has said to me in 400 years. It's such an incredible, unexpected response, and it immediately diffuses all the tension. It proves that Owen's stubborn compassion hasn't just kept the dragon alive physically, it's completely awakened Vaughn's profound respect for familial love. Gareth recognizes this instantly, and wordlessly, he allows Owen to continue his daily visits.
And that brings us to Chapter 3, A Village Changes Its Mind.
Because those rumors, they spread beyond just a father. They seep all the way through the valley and finally reach the village elder Aldrich. He confronts Owen, and we get this fascinating collision of 2 completely opposing worldviews.
Aldrich is operating purely on historical fear. He brings up a 300-year-old tragedy where a dragon burned a nearby settlement to the ground. But Owen counters that with radical empathy and cold, hard logic. He points out that Vaughn has been in that cave for 8 months, vulnerable and totally peaceful. He came there to die alone, not to harm anyone in their valley. It really makes you think about how incredibly difficult it is to overcome generational prejudice. Owen is basically asking the elder to judge the creature for who he is today, not what his species did 3 centuries ago.
This philosophical debate quickly turns into a matter of imminent life and death in our next chapter, Facing the Dragon Hunters.
The real turning point of the story hits when a calculating man named Barrick arrives in the valley. He brings 5 armed men, wagons, and bone saws. And they aren't there on some noble quest to slay a monster and save a village. No, they're there to harvest a dying creature while it's still alive, simply for parts and for profit. Owen desperately pleads with his father and Aldrich, arguing that letting these hunters butcher a creature that has done them absolutely no harm is the true evil here. And you know what? His empathy is contagious. When Barrick's hunters march up that mountain trail at dawn, they don't find an empty path. They find 19 terrified but incredibly brave villagers, fathers, elders, a mother who lost her son, and even children. Armed with nothing more than 2 rusty swords and sheer resolve, they stand together in the dark to block the hunters. Seeing that a massacre of villagers is terrible for business, the hunters actually back down.
Learning that the village risked literally everything for him creates a massive mental shift for Vaughn. He asks Owen for something called black root. To prepare it, Owen has to go find this dark green plant near wet rock faces, crush it between flat stones into a thick paste, and apply it to Vaughn's deep shoulder wounds using a wool-tied stick. These tangible, hands-on steps are absolutely crucial to our explainer because they symbolize the exact turning point. Vaughn is no longer passively waiting for the end. He is actively choosing to do something about his own condition. He's choosing to survive.
And this active choice to live brings us right to Chapter 5, the Ground Covenant.
Once Vaughn gets a bit of his strength back, the two of them share this deeply profound exchange under a beautiful starry night sky. Out under those stars, Vaughn decides he needs to test Owen. He told the boy earlier, "I have outlived everything I ever feared." And now, he brutally lists out the absolute worst deeds of his 400-year existence. Burned settlements, broken treaties, all the horrors of war. He essentially wants to push the boy away by showing him the true monster he used to be. But Owen? He doesn't flinch. He sits with his back against the cave wall, listens to 400 years of the worst things this creature has ever done, and then stubbornly asks Vaughn who he is today. Because the dragon Owen sees is the one who asks for medicine, and walks in the dead of night just to avoid scaring people. This realization sparks a genuine, deep, rumbling laughter from Vaughn. It's the exact moment his will to live is fully reclaimed. So to repay this impossible kindness, Vaughn performs something truly extraordinary. It's called the Ground Covenant. Now, this isn't just a simple fantasy spell you'd read about. It is an ancient, permanent bond passed directly into a human's bloodline. It shares the old fire, which manifests as a warm, steady light, and it grants this early warning sense of danger over really great distances. Keep in mind, this hasn't been performed in over 300 years. Vaughn gives his entire remaining legacy to Owen. He forges this magical bond entirely by choice, simply because a young boy had the guts to listen to a monster's worst deeds without ever looking away.
Which leads us beautifully to our final chapter, Flight and Farewell.
With the covenant sealed and his body finally mended, Vaughn announces that it's time for him to return to the old territories in the north. Just picture this final moment. Vaughn steps out into the full morning daylight. The villagers watching from the valley below stop dead in their tracks as this enormous creature stands tall. When Vaughn finally spreads those massive wings, the morning light shines right through the old tears of his damaged left wing. It illuminates them, making them look like a golden map of everywhere the dragon had traveled and survived. His deepest, ugliest scars have completely transformed into a radiant, soaring symbol of resilience. He takes flight, circling the valley one last time before heading into the endless open sky.
Down below, Owen just watches until there is literally nothing left to watch but the blue sky. He opens his left hand, and that small, steady, ancient light is still there, glowing warmly and patiently right against his palm. I want to leave you with a thought today. If you were faced with the monster's dark past, would you have the courage to ask what they are today? It's an incredible lesson in radical empathy, reminding us that sometimes the most heroic thing you can possibly do is simply sit in the dark with someone until they are ready to step back